In April 2023, China made an announcement that barely made any headlines. The People's Bank of China revealed it had added 58 tons of gold to its reserves. Then, in May, another 16 tons. In June, 23 tons. And in July, 23 tons more. By the end of 2023, China had stacked up over 225 tons of gold in its official reserves in just 1 year. That is the most aggressive gold buying spree by any central bank in decades. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most analysts believe China's official numbers are dramatically understated. The actual amount of gold China controls could be double or even triple what they're reporting. And this isn't just about stockpiling a shiny metal. This is about preparing for a fundamental shift in the global monetary system. China is quietly building the infrastructure to challenge the dollar's dominance, and gold is the foundation of that plan. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what China is doing with gold, why they're doing it, and what it means for the dollar, the global economy, and for your wealth. Because China's gold move isn't a conspiracy. It's a documented strategy. And most people aren't paying attention. First, let's look at the official numbers and why they're almost certainly wrong. By the end of 2024, China held approximately 2,264 tons of gold in its official reserves, according to the People's Bank of China. This puts them in the top tier, but still behind countries like the United States, which holds over 8,100 tons, and Germany with over 3,300 tons. Officially, China has less gold than Russia or France. But here's the catch. Almost nobody believes that number. For years, between 2019 and 2023, China reported zero increases in its gold reserves. The number was just frozen. Then, suddenly in 2023, the monthly updates started again. Meanwhile, during those silent years, China was the world's largest gold producer, digging up about 370 tons per year. They were also the world's largest gold importer, bringing in over 1,000 tons annually through hubs like Hong Kong and Shanghai. So, where did all that gold go? If the government wasn't officially adding it to its reserves, who was buying it? Analysts estimate that China's actual gold holdings could be anywhere from 4,000 to over 10,000 tons. How? Through off-balance sheet accounts. Think of state-owned banks, sovereign wealth funds like the China Investment Corporation, and other strategic reserve accounts that are separate from the main central bank. China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange, or SAFE, manages over $3 trillion in foreign reserves. These holdings are separate from the central bank's reported reserves. If SAFE is holding gold, it simply doesn't appear in the official numbers. Why would they hide it? For a few strategic reasons. First, to avoid market impact. If China revealed it held 10,000 tons of gold, the price would skyrocket, making future purchases way more expensive. Second, to avoid political pressure. Openly showing a lack of confidence in the US dollar could create serious diplomatic friction with the United States. And third, for strategic surprise, revealing a massive gold position at just the right moment has far more impact than slowly disclosing it over time. History backs this up. In 2009, China suddenly announced its gold reserves had jumped 75%, an increase that was never reported in real time. In 2015, it happened again. The pattern is clear. China accumulates gold quietly and reports it later in big chunks. So that current official number of 2,264 tons, it's almost certainly just a fraction of the real story. Now, let's talk about China's gold infrastructure. This isn't just about buying, it's about building an entire ecosystem. In 2002, China established the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which is now the world's largest physical gold exchange. Unlike Western markets, which are dominated by paper gold like futures and ETFs, the Shanghai Exchange deals primarily in real physical gold. The amount of gold moving through this exchange is staggering. In 2015, it was 2,600 tons. In 2023, 2,800 tons. We're talking about thousands of tons of physical gold flowing through Shanghai every single year. But where does it go? Well, in 2018, China launched something called the Shanghai International Energy Exchange. This allows oil to be traded in Chinese yuan, and that yuan can then be converted into gold. This creates a WAN oil gold mechanism that completely bypasses the US dollar. A country can sell oil to China, get paid in yuan, and then immediately convert that yuan into physical gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. This gives oil exporters a way to trade with China without ever having to touch or hold US dollars. China's Belt and Road Initiative is another piece of the puzzle, securing gold supply chains around the world through major investments in African gold mines and partnerships with gold-producing nations. On top of all this, Chinese citizens themselves are massive gold buyers. Retail demand often exceeds 1,000 tons per year. This isn't even government buying. It's a deeply ingrained cultural affinity for gold. So why is China hoarding all this gold? The simple answer is to de-risk from the US dollar. China holds over $3 trillion in foreign exchange reserves, with a huge chunk of that in U.S. Treasury bonds. This creates a massive vulnerability. If the U.S. were to freeze China's dollar assets, like it did with Russia's reserves in 2022, China would lose access to a huge portion of its national wealth. Gold solves this problem. You can't freeze physical gold remotely. It's not subject to sanctions. If you physically hold it in your own vault, you control it. China watched very carefully what happened to Russia. When the US and Europe froze about $300 billion of Russian reserves, central banks all over the world got the message. Reserves held in Western currencies are not entirely safe. And of course, the Taiwan issue looms large. If China were to take action and face sanctions, would the US freeze its dollar reserves? Gold is sanction-proof, which makes it strategically essential for Beijing. Beyond defense, gold is also an offensive tool. China wants to internationalize its currency, the yuan, but it has a trust problem. The global financial system does not fully trust the yuan because of China's capital controls and lack of transparency. But imagine a gold-backed digital yuan, or a trade system where yuan is easily convertible to gold. That would give the currency a level of credibility it currently lacks, making it a much more viable alternative to the dollar. Since 2023, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have been discussing the creation of an alternative trade currency. One of the leading proposals is a system backed by gold. With the largest gold reserves in the bloc, whether hidden or not, China would naturally wield enormous influence in such a system. For centuries, gold was the foundation of monetary stability. That all changed in 1971 when the U.S. ended the dollar's convertibility to gold. The dollar became dominant because of America's massive economy, its military power, and the petrodollar system. But today, all three of those pillars are being challenged. China's economy is now close to the size of the U.S. American military dominance is less absolute, and the petrodollar is under pressure from deals like the ones between Saudi Arabia and China. If dollar dominance fades, gold becomes essential again. China is positioning for that world. Now, China isn't acting alone here. Central banks all around the world have been net buyers of gold since 2010. In fact, in 2022 and 2023, central bank gold purchases shot past 1,000 tons each year, the highest levels we've seen in decades. So who's buying? Well, China officially added over 225 tons in 2023. Russia was a huge buyer until the war started, and now their data is a mystery. India is regularly adding to its reserves, and so is Turkey. We're also seeing a lot of buying from central banks across the Middle East and Asia. The pattern is pretty clear. Countries that are less aligned with the U.S. are buying gold like there's no tomorrow. Meanwhile, what are Western central banks doing? The U.S., the U.K., France, Germany, they aren't buying. In fact, some have sold gold over the last 20 years. America's official gold position hasn't budged since the 1970s, sitting at 8,133 tons. Why not buy more? Well, they believe the dollar is secure, that gold is a barbarous relic, as Keynes famously said, and that modern monetary policy simply doesn't need gold backing. But this complacency could be a huge mistake if the system starts to shift. And here's a fun fact. The U.S. hasn't done a full public audit of the gold in Fort Knox since the 1950s. While there have been partial checks, the lack of a complete accounting fuels speculation. But the real point is the strategic difference. China is actively accumulating gold, while the U.S. is just assuming its old stash is enough. China sees gold as vital for monetary independence, while the U.S. sees it as unnecessary because they assume the dollar will dominate forever. This difference could become critical if the dollar's status is ever seriously challenged. So what does this all mean for you? Let's play out a scenario. Imagine China suddenly announces, "Hey everyone, we actually hold 8,000 tons of gold, making them the second largest holder in the world." What happens next? The gold price would explode. Confidence in the U.S. dollar would be shaken to its core, and any talk of a yuan gold connection would suddenly gain massive credibility. It would be a financial earthquake. Or what if China and the BRICS nations launch a trade currency that's partially backed by gold? Countries could then settle trade without using U.S. dollars. Demand for dollars would drop, and gold would become even more valuable. This could seriously undermine the petrodollar system that's been in place for decades. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight, but it's the direction China is moving in. Historically, gold is seen as a hedge against inflation. If China keeps buying and their holdings become more public, the gold price could rise significantly. This raises a big question for individuals. Should you own gold? On one hand, central banks are buying it, which is a powerful signal. Money printing continues to devalue currencies, and geopolitical instability is on the rise. Gold is nobody's liability. On the other hand, gold doesn't pay you interest or dividends. Its price can be volatile, and you have to think about storing it securely. I'm not here to give financial advice, but what China is doing suggests they believe gold will be incredibly important in the future. They are playing the long game, positioning themselves over a 10 to 20-year horizon. The big moment will likely come when the dollar's reserve status really starts to slide, or a major geopolitical crisis hits. So keep an eye on the volume at the Shanghai Gold Exchange, China's official monthly purchases, and any real movement on a BRICS currency. If those things accelerate, the shift is happening faster than anyone thinks. To wrap it all up, China is quietly stacking gold on a scale we haven't witnessed since the end of the Bretton Woods system. Their official number is just over 2,200 tons, but the real figure is almost certainly much, much higher, maybe over 5,000 tons. This isn't just about a shiny metal, it's about building an escape hatch from the dollar system. After seeing Russia's reserves get frozen, China knows the danger of keeping its wealth in a currency controlled by a potential rival. Gold is sanction-proof, globally liquid, and has been considered money for 5,000 years. The West, meanwhile, isn't responding. The assumption is that the dollar will rule forever, but China is preparing for a different world, one where gold matters again. History teaches us that monetary systems always change. The pound was replaced by the dollar. The gold standard was abandoned. The next big change is coming, and China is positioning itself to be on the winning side. If this changed how you see China's strategy and the future of money, make sure to subscribe. I track the major shifts in global power that most people don't notice until it's too late. Let me know in the comments, do you think gold will play a key role in the next global monetary system? Thanks for watching. And remember, pay attention to what central banks do, not what they say.